Like you said, our viewers do get the chance to experience the bush in so many different ways, and a lot more than, like you said, guides.
Yeah, more than some of you have been on more game drives with WildEarth than I've been, and I've been on a fair amount of them. So, sorry, I was just thinking about a whole bunch of things that I don't even want to open that door now. I've really been through a very interesting stage, Mark. I've told you, maybe later tonight we'll sit around the fire for a while longer and talk about some of it. But there really has been some breathtaking sociological discoveries for me almost in the last while in terms of how people share this with us and we with you. But like I said, that's a conversation that can probably take us through to sunrise. One night I actually did stay up through sunrise thinking about it. So let's maybe get back to a couple of questions. Like I said, there were one or two almost humorous ones that I quite enjoyed. And forgive me if I forget the names. I wrote them down here. It's from Peggy, and I think it's more on a light-hearted note, asking if elephants ever get hiccups. I didn't say ever. I've never noticed it, but I'm sure it does happen. I know baboons can get hiccups. I've seen baboons with that. And I don't actually know enough about the physical aspect of what causes hiccups, how it makes the diaphragm react and so on. So, but I would guess maybe. I mean, I've seen it with predators. I've seen it with, I can't remember, leopard or lion, one of the two, when they were very full. And speaking of full, the other question that came through from Amanda was asking about biltong, which is something, again, that if you come on safari out here, you'll probably taste it. It's beef jerky, essentially. And just asking what kind of venison meat gets used for it. Kudu is the typical one, beef also, but also other kinds of venison. In South Africa, people do eat venison quite a bit, and it's a bit of a strange concept, maybe relative to game drives, but interesting thing to think about. If more people ate venison, maybe there'd be more animals around living in the wild.
Absolutely, and I mean, venison and use of wildlife as we see it in the reserves, it's obviously the land that's used for beef and so on is natural environment that has to be utilised for that, and once that's utilised on that side, then obviously we lose the chance to have wild game over there. So there is definitely a market out there, and South Africans, biltong is definitely a very favourite luxury or delicacy for a lot of South Africans. It's definitely a strong part of our culture out here. I'm sure a lot of you will get the opportunity to try that one day.
Yeah, and it's a good one. I teethed in it as a youngster.
No, it's one of those things myself. Once I start eating it, the packet's gone, and I'm usually a little bit ill afterwards just because I've overindulged. But it's definitely something worth trying.
It's salt and meat, essentially. Something we've craved for a long time. That deep voice you can maybe hear in the background is Million. He's just coming past the back.
Which is a good topic, talking about background noises. I believe there was a question on background noises. Yeah,
it's funny how sometimes being live can actually lead you, never mind having to figure it out yourself. Like I've said before, just quickly before going to that, I feel a bit strange here still, because I feel like I just want to chat, same as on the vehicle, and I'm sure we'll fully get to that stage. It feels like we're still like having a conversation rather than just chatting. But we spoke to Graham earlier. I think chatting would become something it's quite possible down the line, more and more so. But background noises, apart from me rambling on sometimes, is about Gowrie warthole, a question that came through from Sandy asking, and I'm sure many of you have wondered about the same thing. There's quite often various noises you can hear from the sound, apart from some of the funny sounds we had. We had a bit of sound issues, starting from hyenas chewing in the cable to various other things. But quite often you can hear, or not often, occasionally you can hear dogs barking. There are some dogs around the reserve with owners, obviously, not just running around, apart from the wild dogs and the jackals. But sometimes there's maybe something that upsets them, maybe something running around the garden or something like that, and that's what you're hearing. Also the drums occasionally, I have noticed, I remember a few days ago, a week or so ago somewhere, there was a breeding herd as well as Wonky at the same time down at the pan drinking water, and the dinner drums played, and the breeding herd sort of moved off slowly. Wonky, of course, just ignored it. I think I might have even noticed his foot tapping a little bit. I mean, he's well used to everything. And also sometimes voices, again, from the lodge. So it's again, we can pretend it's sort of not there, but it really is. It's all part of us. You know, we're close enough to the warthole to be able to hear sounds from there, and vice versa. So if you do hear some odd sounds, it's nothing weird. It's just the people that live around it as well.
Yeah, which is a great thing, really, about the reserves out here. It's one thing that I've always admired is there is, and we here at WildEarth, our prime example is, like Peter says, there's people around, people living out here, and it's communities, little families at the end of the day. I mean, we're all a little family over here, and we have a large extended family out all over the world. We often do hear some strange noises out in the bush. And speaking of strange noises, and I think I may have actually mentioned it before, I have normally stayed in the room directly next to the final control center where all our broadcasting equipment is, and a lot of our sound, well, all our sound equipment. And many nights while I'm lying in my bed fast asleep, and the sound has been left up quite high, a hyena decides to come and put his head right next to the mics there by the waterhole and lets out an almighty cry, which amplifies as it comes through the speakers, and it sounds like he's standing right next to my bed while I'm half asleep. So it can always be quite exciting hearing that noise. It's not particularly... well, it is a very pleasant way to wake up.
It's not a bad way, except that, you know, there must be a split second where sort of the primal part of your brain just tells you that there's a hyena calling next to your ear, and that's not normal, you know, until you wake up enough to realize, okay, it's coming through a fiber optic line. But yeah, I mean, the community thing, again, it's, like I said, I'm a bit of a... There's so many things I actually want to talk about that is not possible at the moment. But the community thing is a very real thing in terms of all of us living out here together, literally with you as well, spending a lot of time with us, and also with the animals around us. Now, there's a question that sort of adds into that, which we'll touch on when Matteo comes and joins us now. We'll sort of touch on that again as well. But it's a question that came through from Joe, asking about more specifically leopards in the Sabi Sand and the level of habituation that's been achieved between essentially vehicles / people and leopards, and whether there's potential problems with it. Joe gave a bit of history and so on as well. I want to, Joe, if you don't mind, not to go into the details of that specific question too much. What it immediately made me think of, something that we've dealt with to a large extent over the last week or two, is that it's a level of habituation of animals to us. In other words, how used they get to vehicles, game drive vehicles, and Marco, I'm sure you've seen, it's something I've noticed even more as I've really been looking at behavior. They react slightly different to the WildEarth vehicle because it is slightly different. It looks a bit different. It's got Alex sitting in the back and an antenna sticking out, and it's shorter, and it makes a bit of a buzz noise the whole time. And animals in the beginning ignored it a little bit because it was strange, but they've seen it around long enough now that they now come and investigate it, to the point where Wonky the other night was so close, I literally could have reached out like that and grabbed his tusk, and he was just having a look at us. So my point I'm trying to get to, Joe, and everyone else as well, is that you can think of it from two ways. The one is that the animals are getting habituated to us and how they're coping with it, which in my experience, Marco, and give your side of it just now, they deal with fine. Animals can learn to get habituated to vehicles, the same as elephants can learn to get habituated to drongos, and the little birds can learn to get habituated to elephant. That's normal. Animals have always, over a long period of time, learned to interact and coexist with other species. What gets interesting, and this is what had me thinking earlier, is how we cope with that. As humans, how do we cope with the fact that animals are getting used to us as well? In other words, do we now go and say, oh no, this leopard is getting too close to camp, we've got to make something or do something because now it's threatening me, or I'm feeling uncomfortable because of this elephant being comfortable with me, and I'm going to cope with that now. And that's something that, Joe, the question, what it sparks in my mind is very interesting, and I'll think about it more and play with it a little bit on Drive as well over the next few weeks, is how do we as humans cope with animals accepting us in the environment?
Yeah, no, that's actually a very interesting way of looking at it, Peter. I must say, I've never tackled it that way. It's normally talking about animals being habituated, so the general way of seeing it is how they feel with our presence. But no, it's a very good point. How do we feel with their presence being close?